I was standing on the pristine, newly laid paver driveway of my son's ridiculous mansion, clutching a casserole dish full of my famous slow-cooked pulled pork, the kind of dish that won a blue ribbon at the county fair 3 years running. 57 years young, a crisp white linen shirt covering my still respectable figure, and a heart full of motherly love, or at least motherly obligation. I had just driven 90 miles, a trip involving two separate detours for construction and one near miss with a deer who clearly had a death wish, all to celebrate my grandson, Timmy's 10th birthday. This wasn't just any pulled pork. It was Timmy's favorite, the one he begged for, the one he said tasted like a hug from heaven. A small, sweet gesture, a mother's attempt to be nice, helpful, and present. As I reached the massive custom-made mahogany door, it looked less like a home entrance and more like a portal to a medieval castle. It flew open, not to embrace me, no. It was my daughter-in-law, Brittany. 30-something, rail thin, with a face that looked permanently displeased, as if she had just swallowed a lemon dipped in kale smoothie. Brittany wasn't just an antagonist. She was a walking, talking, highly organized system of emotional exclusion. She blocked the doorway, a human-sized, designer-clad obstacle. The air immediately thickened with the distinct, unwelcome chill of confrontation. "Oh, you," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of disdain usually reserved for gum stuck to a Louboutin sole. She didn't move an inch. The pulled pork casserole, warm and fragrant, felt suddenly heavy in my hands. The sight of her, perfect and poised in a house I knew she bled my son dry to furnish, made my jaw clench. This wasn't the welcoming, gracious entrance I had pictured in my mind's eye during that long, harrowing drive. "Happy birthday to Timmy, dear," I managed, trying to inject some saccharine politeness into my voice. "I brought the pulled pork, his favorite, you know. He asked for it." Her eyes narrowed, flicking dismissively from my face to the blue ribbon dish. "We already have catering, Carol, an organic, gluten-free spread from Chef Julian. Your creation won't fit the theme or the dietary requirements." She emphasized the words creation and dietary requirements with almost a painful level of condescension. I almost laughed, the absurdity of it threatening to bubble up as dark, sarcastic humor. "It's a 10-year-old's birthday party, Brittany, not a farm-to-table wellness retreat. And since when is your son, my grandson, gluten-free? Last Christmas, he practically inhaled 3 bags of my homemade white flour cookies. Did a doctor suddenly issue a decree on his 10th birthday? It's a lifestyle, Carol, something you wouldn't understand." She sniffed, pulling her thin, perfectly sculpted eyebrows into a judgmental arch. "Honestly, your presence is just disruptive. The caterers are setting up. We have a vision for this party. And frankly, a woman walking in with a steaming crock pot of processed pork is not part of it." She was a fortress of privilege and self-importance. Disruptive. That word hit me. I was the matriarch, the one who'd spent 2 decades sacrificing her own career so my son, her husband, could have the best schools and college fund. Now I was disruptive. The humiliation was a hot, sudden flush under my collar. This wasn't about the food. It was about the power dynamic. It was about her slowly but surely erasing me from my son's life and now my grandson's. This kind of emotional slight, delivered right at the moment I was trying to do something sweet, cut deeper than any financial betrayal. I took a slow, deep breath, reminding myself of the secret I carried, a secret that made her mansion, her lifestyle, and her entire petty existence look like a cheap Monopoly board. I was an American woman, 57, a widow, who had worked hard and saved harder, only to be dismissed by this entitled brat. My initial goal was just to see Timmy, but now a stronger feeling was taking root. A deep, slow burn of righteous fury and a growing resolve to fight back against this casual cruelty. The memory of a conversation I had with my financial advisor, Mr. Hemmings, about that money gave me a calm I didn't feel externally.
Very well, Brittany, I said, my voice dangerously even. But you can at least take the dish. It's hot. I'm not carrying a 20-pound casserole back for 90 miles. I practically shoved the dish into her hands. The look of disgust on her face as she was forced to touch my humble, non-organic food was priceless. She cradled it away from her body as if it were a biohazard. "I'll tell Mark to send someone to your house to get the dish," she said, already turning to dismiss me, her back a sharp line of rejection. "Now, if you'll excuse me, the party is about to start. I'm sure you have other plans." The implication was clear. My plans were insignificant, my presence unwanted. As I stood there, watching her retreat into the grand hallway of a home I had contributed to indirectly through decades of maternal support, a dark thought crossed my mind, something that would have made my late husband gasp. She thinks she's won a battle over a pork roast, bless her vapid little heart. I muttered to myself, adjusting my linen shirt, feeling the familiar, stubborn steel in my spine. The injustice of it all, the sheer audacity of her behavior was staggering. I was a white American woman, not some nuisance to be swept under the expensive Persian rug. This was only the beginning of my conflict. I pulled out my phone and quickly recorded a short video, pretending to be talking to a friend. Honestly, the level of entitlement these days, it makes you realize you can't just keep things bottled up. If you're going through something like this, or if you just want to see how I handle my disruptive mother-in-law status, you really ought to subscribe to the channel, I whispered, the sarcasm thick enough to cut with a knife. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the little birds try to kick the mama bird out of the nest. I ended the recording and slipped the phone into my purse. The car ride back was a blur of building resentment and furious planning. They wanted to shut me out? Fine. They had no idea just how valuable my absence would be. They didn't know about the $50 million investment my late husband and I had made over the years, the one they thought had been lost in the market crash years ago. They thought I was just Carol, the easily dismissed mother-in-law. They were profoundly, hilariously wrong. My mind was racing. I had to pivot. The original plan was to simply be the quiet, generous mother, occasionally funding a vacation or two. That plan was officially scrapped. Now it was about strategy, self-respect, and a certain kind of delicious, long-game revenge. I spent the rest of the drive dissecting every syllable of Brittany's dismissal, fueling the fire that was now burning in my gut. She just messed with the wrong, disruptive woman. I couldn't shake the feeling, was I overreacting to a simple dietary faux pas? Was this just millennial boundary setting, as my friend Susan called it? Or was this the deliberate emotional cut I knew it to be? The path I choose next determines whether I'm erased from my grandson's life forever, or if I finally unleash the $50 million secret that will expose my son and daughter-in-law's true motives. The decision is coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss how I use that massive secret to regain my place in the family.
The next morning, the casserole dish, now suspiciously clean, too clean perhaps, meaning they probably dumped the pulled pork and sterilized the container with industrial-strength bleach, was sitting on my doorstep. No note, no text, just the empty vessel of my wasted effort and the silent, arrogant confirmation of their dismissal. It felt less like a return and more like a symbol of my expulsion. I picked it up, the ceramic still cool from the early autumn air, and for a fleeting second, I considered tossing it right into the neighbor's recycling bin, a small, petty act of defiance. But I didn't. I simply placed it on the kitchen counter, where it became a monument to Brittany's calculated cruelty. I called my son, Mark. He, of course, didn't answer. Straight to voicemail, a predictable and cowardly move. I left a voicemail that was deceptively calm, a low-grade menace wrapped in motherly concern. "Mark, dear, just checking in. Saw Brittany yesterday. She mentioned the dietary restrictions for Timmy's party. Very surprising considering his usual appetite for anything with actual flavor. Anyway, I just wanted to remind you about the will. We really should discuss the terms soon. especially considering the current family dynamics. Call me back. Love, Mom. The word will was the verbal equivalent of a financial defibrillator, guaranteed to elicit a response from my son, who had become a bizarre amalgamation of entitlement and ambition, heavily influenced by his wife's gold-digging tendencies. Sure enough, the phone rang back precisely 4 minutes later. No preamble, no, "How are you, Mom?" Just a tense, demanding tone. "Mom, what was that message? You know I'm swamped. What's this about the will? There's nothing to discuss. Everything's set." He sounded agitated, already on the defensive. "Is it, Mark? Is it really? Because when your father and I drafted the final version, we made some provisions tied directly to the continued health and respect of certain familiar relationships," I replied, leaning against the counter, enjoying this sudden shift in power. "I didn't actually have a will like that, not yet, but a little fabrication never hurt a good strategic game." "What in the hell does that even mean, Mom?" he snapped, forgetting his polite corporate voice. "Is Brittany involved in this? Did she tell you something? Because she was just trying to keep things organized for the party." He immediately defaulted to the poor little wife defense. "It means, Mark, that a mother who is good enough to bake your son's favorite dish and drive 90 miles but not good enough to cross your threshold is a mother who might need to reconsider her long-term investment strategy in your future," I stated, letting the silence hang, thick and accusatory. "And for the record, your wife told me to disappear. Not in so many words, of course. She's too polished with that, but the meaning was clear as a summer sky." He sputtered, a sound like a wet sponge trying to defend itself. "That's ridiculous. She's just stressed. Look, I'll talk to her, but don't you dare start messing with the will, Mom. Everything we've built, everything we planned, it depends on that. You know that." There it was, the thinly veiled financial panic. His love for me was directly proportional to the size of the inheritance. And everything I built, Mark, depended on raising a son who wouldn't let his mother be treated like a delivery service for unwanted leftovers, I countered, my voice hardening. "Here's the deal. I want a face-to-face meeting, just you, me, and a professional mediator. We need to establish some new boundaries and discuss the assets. If you refuse, I will consider that your official abdication of the right to any future support. Think carefully, son. I have more than you know. Much more." I hung up before he could respond, leaving him dangling on the fishing line of his own greed. The sheer relief of finally speaking my mind, using the language they understood, money and legal maneuvering, was exhilarating. I was no longer the victim. I was the negotiator, armed with a secret that dwarfed their pathetic squabbles. The truth was, my late husband, a brilliant but eccentric investor, had secretly placed a large sum, $50 million to be exact, into a highly complex, untraceable trust fund years ago, meant for my retirement and my discretion alone. It wasn't in a standard will. It was a side note, a break glass in case of emergency clause I had only recently accessed. They thought he'd lost it all. A beautiful, convenient lie I'd let them believe. Now the $50 million secret wasn't just a safety net. It was my tactical weapon. I was a white American woman, 57, a mother, and I was not going to be disposable. My newfound resolve was sharp and clear. I called Mr. Hemmings, my financial advisor, and told him to prepare the documents. "The game has changed, Robert. We're going nuclear on the boundaries," I told him, a grim, satisfied smile touching my lips. My internal conflict, the doubt and pain, was receding, replaced by the cool certainty of a woman who knows her worth and the power of her position. This was my life, my money, and my dignity, and I was going to fight for every last shred of it. The sheer theatricality of the impending confrontation was almost intoxicating. I know Mark is already scrambling.
He thinks he knows my limits, but he has no idea what I'm preparing. Will he agree to the meeting and expose his desperation? Or will he try to intimidate me, risking the $50 million secret I've kept hidden for years? This isn't just about a house anymore. It's a moral and financial showdown. You absolutely need to see the humiliating scenario I've planned for their professional mediator meeting.
Mark agreed to the meeting. Of course he did. Greed, like a particularly nasty virus, is highly motivating. But he threw in a caveat, a weak attempt to assert control. No mediator, Mom. That's ridiculous. We'll meet with our family attorney, Mr. Thompson. He's professional and knows our situation. He thought he was gaining an advantage, bringing in his legal muscle. I simply replied, "Fine, Mark. His office. Tuesday. I'll bring my paperwork." I relished the small victory of setting the date and location. Tuesday arrived and I dressed for war, though my armor was a perfectly tailored navy suit and a pair of sensible but powerful heels. No more linen shirts and casserole dishes. This was a board meeting, and I was the chairwoman of the board of my own life. I drove to the sleek, intimidating glass tower where Mr. Thompson's firm resided. Thompson himself was a man who looked exactly like his expensive suit, smooth, gray, and utterly devoid of visible personality. Mark and Brittany were already seated in the conference room. Mark looked pale and anxious, clearly already running financial scenarios in his head. Brittany, predictably, was doing her best impression of a glamorous ice sculpture, all sharp angles and cold disdain. She hadn't bothered to look up from her phone when I entered, a move that only added fuel to my internal fire. "Good afternoon, Carol," Mr. Thompson began, his voice dry and rustling like old legal parchment. "Mark has asked me to facilitate this conversation to address your concerns regarding the family will and the estate." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson, but let's be perfectly clear," I said, placing my briefcase squarely on the polished mahogany table with a decisive thud. "The will is actually a separate matter. This meeting is about boundaries and respect." I fixed my gaze at Brittany, who finally, grudgingly, lowered her phone. "Yesterday, your client's wife, Brittany, blocked me from entering my grandson's birthday party after I drove 90 miles to bring him a gift and a dish of food he specifically requested. She then informed me that my presence was disruptive and essentially told me to leave." Brittany immediately cut in, her voice shrill with feigned innocence. "That's completely misrepresented, Carol. I simply said we had a caterer. We were trying to maintain a cohesive aesthetic. It was an organic party, and your food—" "Oh, please, darling, spare me the organic lecture," I interrupted, injecting a heavy dose of sarcasm into my tone. "Since when did cohesive aesthetic trump family? I'm 57 years old. I raised the man you married, and you treat me like a clumsy delivery person? That is not an aesthetic. That is blatant, calculated, emotional cruelty. It's the definition of emotional alienation, and it stops now." Mark finally spoke up, a pathetic attempt to mediate. "Mom, come on. It was a misunderstanding. We're sorry if you felt slighted. We just want to move past this." He was all about damage control, clearly terrified I'd actually follow through on my threat about the will. "No, Mark, we are not moving past this. We are defining a future where I am treated with the dignity and respect I've earned, or a future where I make a massive financial restructuring." I opened my briefcase just enough to reveal the corner of a thick, official-looking document with a large, ominous seal. This was the moment I played my hand, but not the whole hand, just a terrifying glimpse of my royal flush. "You see, Mr. Thompson?" I continued, addressing the lawyer directly, who was now looking visibly more alert. "My late husband and I established a rather unique financial instrument years ago. Due to a series of
Unreported market gains? This account has grown into a rather substantial sum. It's not part of the standard probate, and frankly, my son and his wife are entirely unaware of its existence and its current magnitude. I paused for dramatic effect. Brittany scoffed. Oh, here we go, the fantasy wealth. Mark, your father lost everything in '08. She's bluffing. Her arrogance was almost unbelievable. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers, my voice dropping to a low, confident register. Am I, Brittany? Do you really want to bet your expensive lifestyle on a guess? The value of this unreported asset is currently sitting at approximately $50 million. I delivered the number. 50 million, with the precision of a surgical strike. The room went silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the rapid, involuntary gasp from Mark. Thompson, the seasoned professional, didn't move, but the small, involuntary widening of his eyes was all the confirmation I needed. The number had registered. Brittany's jaw actually dropped, destroying her carefully maintained composure. The transformation from dismissive ice queen to panic-stricken opportunist was instantaneous and highly gratifying. My gentle, kind act of bringing a casserole was immediately countered by their cold dismissal, and now my response was financial shock and awe. The tension in the room was palpable. My heart was pounding, but my face remained a mask of cool maternal severity. I had hit them where it hurt most, their financial security. This wasn't about the pulled pork anymore. It was about the power dynamic, and I had just flipped the entire table over. Mark looked at Brittany with pure, unadulterated fear. Fear that her previous behavior had just cost them a fortune. This was merely the start of my strategic campaign against their emotional abuse. I just dropped the $50 million bomb, and their faces were priceless. Now that they know the secret fortune exists, will they immediately change their tune and shower me with fake affection? Or will they try to launch a legal challenge to claim the money? The answer is revealed in the next chapter when Mark attempts a truly desperate, humiliating act to win me back. You cannot miss the level of their hypocrisy.
The silence stretched, heavy and awkward, broken only by Mr. Thompson clearing his throat. He was the first to regain his professional composure, but his eyes, when they met mine, held a newfound respect, or at least a respect for my financial clout. "Carol," he said, his voice now noticeably smoother, Mark and Brittany were, naturally, unaware of this substantial asset. Perhaps we could discuss the terms of this trust. Perhaps, I replied, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. But first, we must establish the ground rules for the future. As I said, this asset is entirely in my control and discretion. It is not part of the standard inheritance Mark has been expecting. It is a reward, Mr. Thompson. A reward for those who demonstrate true family support and respect. I made sure the words cut into Mark and Brittany. Brittany, having moved past her initial shock, tried to pivot to damage control with breathtaking speed. Her voice was suddenly soft, almost saccharine, a tone I hadn't heard from her since the wedding day, and even then it was clearly strained. "Carol, my dear, I am so incredibly sorry about the mix-up with the party. I was simply overwhelmed with the catering and the logistics. I truly, deeply apologize if I made you feel unwelcome. I've always thought of you as, well, as my own mother. You're Timmy's grandmother, for goodness sake." I nearly choked on my own indignation. "Oh, the tears of a clown," I muttered under my breath, loud enough for Mark to flinch. Funny how that familial affection only appears when the dollar signs are floating in the air. Yesterday, I was disruptive. Today, I'm my own mother. The script change is rapid, Brittany.
but your acting is subpar. It's transparent and, frankly, insulting to my intelligence." Mark, however, went for the full-throttle, humiliating grovel. He got out of his chair, walked around the table, and actually knelt beside my chair. "Mom, please. This is my mistake. My wife was stressed. I should have stood up for you. You're the best mother in the world. Dad and you worked so hard for us. We need you, Mom. We love you. Please don't do anything drastic with those funds. Think of your grandchildren. Think of your legacy." He grabbed my hand, squeezing it with a desperate fervor. The physical display was staggering, a grotesque pantomime of affection driven by pure financial terror. "That is exactly what I'm doing, Mark. I am thinking of my legacy, and my legacy is not defined by enabling the emotional abuse of my child and his wife. My legacy is defined by standing up for myself." I turned back to Mr. Thompson, ignoring Mark's pathetic kneeling figure. "The terms are simple. I will establish a foundation. The foundation will provide grants and potentially a generous annual allowance. But here is the crucial part. The recipients of the foundation must demonstrate an ongoing pattern of respect, inclusion, and genuine, non-transactional kindness towards me. I stressed the word non-transactional for Brittany's benefit. Any documented instance of emotional manipulation, exclusion, or disrespect will result in the immediate and permanent removal of the offending party from the list of potential beneficiaries. Thompson quickly jotted notes, his pencil moving like a hummingbird's wings. "Documentation, Carol? What kind of documentation?" "I have been keeping a detailed journal of our interactions for the past 2 years, Mr. Thompson," I said, tapping my briefcase. I was no longer just a mother. I was an archivist of their misdeeds. And yes, the incident with the pulled cork casserole and the disruptive comment is in there, chapter and verse. Mark finally stood up, his face a mixture of humiliation and fury. "You're punishing us, Mom. This is extortion. You can't just weaponize your money like this." "No, Mark. I'm setting a price on my dignity," I retorted, meeting his gaze squarely. "And since you and your wife are apparently unable to provide that dignity freely, I'm incentivizing it. It's called a boundary, son. Look it up. And I fully intend to use the $50 million secret to enforce it. The next move is yours. Treat me like family or risk losing everything." I stood up, gathered my things, and gave them a cold, final look. "Good day, gentlemen. Brittany." I walked out, leaving them in the opulent but now deeply unsettling silence of the lawyer's office. The triumph was immense, but the fight was far from over. I knew they would scheme. My hands were shaking slightly as I got into my car, but it was from adrenaline, not fear. I had done it. I had faced the systematic cruelty and countered it with a strategic masterstroke. The internal conflict was settling. The right path was clear. This was the only way to preserve my sanity and my relationship with my grandson. They are desperate now. The $50 million secret is hanging over their heads like the sword of Damocles, and I know Brittany will not surrender easily. Will she try a public apology? A staged reconciliation with Timmy? The next chapter shows their desperate attempt to undermine my foundation by using social media and public opinion against me.
As expected, the frantic phone calls and text messages started immediately. Mark was sending long, rambling apologies, sprinkled with nauseatingly sweet memories of my parenting. Brittany, the tactical one, took a different, more insidious approach: the public performance. 2 days after our disastrous meeting, I received an anonymous tip, a link to Brittany's newly activated public Instagram account. She had previously kept her life entirely private, a fortress of curated exclusivity. Now it was a sudden, jarring shift to relentless public virtue signaling. The first post was a carefully staged photo of her and Timmy, smiling sweetly, baking cookies, ironically gluten-free of course. The caption, however, was the masterstroke of passive aggression. So blessed to teach my son the true meaning of family, love, and forgiveness. Some people carry so much bitterness and old grudges, they can't see the good things right in front of them. Holding on to negativity only hurts you, not them. Hashtag family first, unconditional love, toxic positivity. The sheer audacity of her public posturing made me gasp, then laugh, a short, sharp burst of dark humor. She was painting me as the bitter, toxic matriarch, the one holding the grudge, while conveniently omitting the $50 million motivation that had so magically created her sudden burst of unconditional love. This wasn't just a slight, it was an attempt to poison the well of public opinion and pressure me into submission. It was emotional warfare fought on the digital front. My internal conflict flared again. Should I just ignore her pathetic attempts to manipulate the narrative, or should I fight fire with fire? I was an American woman, 57, a private person, used to dealing with issues face to face, not through carefully filtered saccharine snapshots. But I knew the rules had changed. In their world, social media was the court of public opinion, and if I allowed her narrative to solidify, it would undermine my moral standing in the foundation I planned to create. I couldn't let her win. I called my old friend Martha, a brilliant retired PR executive, and laid out the entire ridiculous saga, ending with Brittany's Instagram post. Martha's laughter was the tonic I needed. "Oh, Carol, bless her heart. She thinks she's playing chess, but she's using checkers," Martha chuckled. "We're going to use her own platform against her. We're going to tell a real story about family and a real story about boundaries. It's time for Carol's Revenge media campaign." Martha advised me to create my own public presence, a simple, elegant YouTube channel and a Facebook page. No theatrics, Carol, just authentic, mature storytelling. The public loves a good story about a wealthy, white, mature woman standing up to entitlement. It gives them hope. I decided to call the channel The Dignity Diaries. My first post was not a rant, but a video of me quietly, methodically sorting through old photo albums, showcasing my life, my marriage to my late husband, and most importantly, Mark's childhood. I was careful to select pictures where I was clearly giving, supporting, and sacrificing. My voiceover was calm, steady, and filled with a mature, pointed sadness. Looking through these old photos reminds you of the promise you make as a parent, a promise to love, to support, and to always be there. You never expect that one day you'll be asked to pay for your seat at the family table or that your value will be equated to your bank statement. I then showed a split-second blurry clip of the pulled pork casserole dish. Sometimes the biggest betrayals aren't in courtrooms. They're in small, calculated rejections. They happen when you're doing something good, like making your grandson's favorite meal, and you're told you are disruptive and not part of the aesthetic. The finishing touch was a powerful emotional bite, subtly reinforcing the existence of the $50 million secret without revealing the exact details. I had a secret, a very large secret, that was meant to bless and secure my son's future. I kept it safe, hoping to pass it on to a family built on love. Now I realize that some people only see a mother's value when it's expressed in dollars and cents. My fight now is for my own dignity and for a world where kindness isn't conditional. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My simple, elegant video contrasted so starkly with Brittany's sickly, sweet, forced posts. People saw the truth in my quiet and varnished pain. Comments flooded in. "That level of entitlement is unreal. You deserve so much better, Carol. Don't give them a dime." Finally, someone standing up to the entitled generation. The public narrative was shifting firmly to my side, turning Brittany's attempts at a pity party into a glaring spotlight on her hypocrisy. The irony of using social media to fight emotional alienation was not lost on me, but in this modern age, it was necessary. I felt a surge of energy. I wasn't alone. The community was with me. I was fighting not just for myself, but for every mature American woman who felt disregarded and disrespected by their entitled children. Brittany's desperation would only grow, and I knew her next move would be far more reckless than a simple Instagram post.